Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations, and definitely not medical advice. We're here for informational purposes only. To follow up with our amazing guests, please do check out the show notes, and to stay in the loop with the QBC podcast, join our email list, also linked in the show notes. Hello, everybody. So nice to be here with you. I truly, truly appreciate that you all show up and do this with me. It feels like a collective effort, even though I'm the one here with the microphone. I can feel you all, and I appreciate it. Before we get started today with our guest, Amanda Stencken, who is coming back to do a deeper dive into our primitive reflexes and how so many of our behaviors and issues as adults can actually be traced back to a lack of reflex integration as an infant or even in the womb. As always, though, there is a solution. Just like when we talked to Nico Kennedy a couple episodes ago about how circadian regulation is so important in the womb and in early childhood. I don't like to go too deep into that stuff without also saying and it can be fixed is not a great word, but healed, right? Like once we understand how it all works, we can go back and fill in the blanks. So Amanda is going to lead us through that beautifully. And we go a little deeper into it than we did the last time she was on. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you all that registration for the certification for practitioners and health coaches is now open. So this is going to be sort of end of August. It's open for maybe another week or so. So if you're on the fence about that, jump off the fence and come join us. I do believe everything happens when it's ready to. So if you don't feel, you're thinking about it, but you don't feel ready, I understand. However, if you're thinking about it and you do feel ready, you're just like, just come. I know right now, the financial piece is a bit of a challenge. We keep expanding this program and adding new guest faculty and adding new faculty members and adding new team members. And we have not raised the price at all. And we have no plans to. So we're trying to keep this, as accessible as possible. That being said, there are a lot of people involved and we do a lot of deep work. So it does, reflect that in the tuition fee. But what we also do is I do coaching sessions throughout the certification. And one of the things we focus on is how to create a workshop to earn back your investment quickly using the information that you've learned in the certification. And in fact, you can even use that workshop as your final project submission at the end of it. So just putting that out there, we are trying to think of all the ways to support our people. That's our goal, and to support them long term, right? We're not just going to teach you a bunch of stuff and then say, see ya. Like once you do this, you're in the community. We're here for you. You have a whole new network of people, referral network, support network, colleague network who will also be there for you. So just wanted to offer that perspective to those of you who are not sure. And I know you're there because we hear from you and we're emailing with you. So just think about it from that perspective, right? Like this isn't just more information. It's more practical information that people really need. And the sooner you can get out there and teach it and present it and work with it, the better for everyone. Okay, back to Amanda. This is really cool stuff. We're going to dive right in. Before we do, reminder, bondcharge.com for your blue blockers. They do make very, very cute glasses. I like them very much. Put QBC in the little discount box at checkout and you will receive 15% off. Have a good episode. Amanda, welcome back to the QBC podcast. Okay, this is going to be really fun. We were already starting to get chatting and I'm like, I have to hit record. This is gold. You're saying all these amazing things. So This is Amanda's second time on the podcast. If you didn't listen to the first interview, highly recommend you go do that. It's wonderful. We did a big, wide-ranging talk on a lot of things. So this time we're going to focus right in, Amanda, on like your key area of expertise at the moment, which is the primitive reflex. So there's an intro where I like go over who you are and what you do and that kind of stuff. So let's just like dive right into that. How do you start when you sort of tell people what this technique is and, you know, why it's effective?
So just a quick overview. Primitive reflexes are, the word reflex kind of gives everybody an idea. It's something that we're not thinking about. It's a movement that happens in response to a stimulus. And like I may have said in the previous conversation, the classic example that we're all familiar with is when you've been to the doctor for your well check and you get the knee to the patella, to the knee, and all of a sudden you get that knee jerk. You're not thinking consciously about the leg jerking up in response to that hit. It just happens. That's the example of a reflex. Another cool example of a reflex is if you're cooking and you accidentally touch a hot plate, a hot pan that just came out of the oven, you're not thinking. You don't think, oh, I'm burning. It hurts. I have to move my finger. You do it in a split second, in a fraction of a split second. That's all happening at an unconscious level, at the level of the brainstem, not even the brainstem in the case of certain things. It stays within the spinal cord, if we're going to get nerdy and talk neuroanatomy. But eventually we realize it, we think about it, and so the information starts going up through the different levels in our nervous system. But these reflexes, the whole idea of a primitive reflex is a reflex that happens early in development. And a lot of work has gone into describing these reflexes, specifically during our intrauterine life, so the first 9 months in uterus, and then for the first year or two after birth. These movements that we do in uterus and then afterwards, movements that we see babies doing, the baby's not thinking about those movements with his or her frontal cortex, right? It's an involuntary reflex response to stimuli in the environment, whether it's heat or cold or touch, gentle touch, the rooting reflex, key example for those of you that have babies in your life, right? And you try to get them to latch on to the breast or to the bottle. And the midwife or the lactation consultant or whatever tells you, oh, just stroke their cheek. That touch causes the lips to purse and baby can suck. That's a reflex. Baby's not thinking about it. The same with anything visual. And so in an ideal situation, all those reflexes happen in turn and they set the stage for permanent lifelong reflexes to come in and set. So I can sit because I have a lifelong sitting reflex active. I can stand, I can be still, I can pay attention, I can move alternating right and left. All those are reflexive patterns that never go away, but they require primitive reflexes to happen first. Eventually the primitive reflexes disappear. We move on to the next stage. And so this goes back to, remembering what babies go through as they're growing, right? They're on their backs. They start moving their limbs. Then eventually they can flip over. They're on their tummy. They can turn back and forth. Then eventually they start moving the head, following some object. All of the things that are happening that the baby's doing are in response to visual, auditory, tactile. Gravity is a powerful stimulus, right? Then the baby can sit. Then the baby can crawl. Then the baby can stand. Then the baby can start walking. All of these happen in a progressive, predetermined pattern, courtesy of the primitive reflexes. What happens, and what a lot of people have figured out from observing babies and kids, is that a lot of behavior issues, learning issues, reading disability, reading deficits, all go back to primitive reflexes that, for whatever reason, didn't disappear when they were supposed to. They remained active.
What do you mean they didn't disappear? Like they didn't sink back down?
They didn't go quietly into the night. So what happens is these reflexes are active until different brain parts become linked up.
Okay.
The neural connections between the brainstem and the basal ganglia, for instance, have to find each other and develop and grow and link up. This is all happening during those first 9 months in utero development in the first year or two after birth. All the different parts of our brain are there when we're born, but they're not all linked up. They're not all connected and talking to each other properly. And the
so just to make sure I understand, so as the baby and the child, and as when we were babies and when we were children, as we moved through those phases of development, those primitive reflexes were helping our brains to develop?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So the psychiatrist that developed a beautiful body of work that I've studied a lot and got me into this world is called Harold Blomberg, and he was a Swedish psychiatrist who passed away a few years ago. But in his first page of one of his first manuals, his words are, movement is key. Movement begets development, which begets higher levels of linkage between the different levels of the brain, which begets more movement, and it becomes this beautiful cycle of movement, stimulus, increased development, which leads to more movement, different kind of stimuli that are more evolved, which leads to higher, more complex development, and so on and so forth. And it's just this beautiful thing that happens. And when anything interrupts that movement, which gives us a stimulus, that's when we end up with issues.
Okay. So the interruption of the movement development is showing up as brain or cognitive deficits.
Yeah.
Because the brain development and the movement are linked.
Correct. We need movement in order to develop. In fact, Leonardo da Vinci is quoted as saying that movement is the cause of all life. So,
wow.
He was an anatomist among all these other things that made him the Renaissance man that he was. So he had an interesting view of the human body.
Definite ADD.
Yeah. So sometimes, for example, when people learn how to use their active primitive reflexes to their advantage, you end up with incredible gymnasts, incredible performers of all areas, whether it's musicians or, artists, dancers, so on and so forth. People, you have to be able to get your body into specific positions or do specific things. And that requires an active reflex. So in some situations that are sort of extreme, I would argue, what's a common household name these days with, the Olympics going on and floor gymnastics and women? What is it? Simone Biles. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody in their right mind can get into those positions unless certain things are not properly linked up. But she and people like her have learned how to use that to their advantage.
Okay.
Runners.
So when you say the primitive reflex is like allowing people to excel in these different areas, like, what do you mean by that? How is that helping?
So when a primitive reflex becomes active and becomes integrated so that postural reflexes can now take over and help the person progress through life, it becomes very, very difficult for people to have the flexibility that they have in their muscles, in their in their posterior chain, in their anterior chain. I mean, think about how these girls bend into.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating to watch, but I'm like, okay, that's not normal. So I'd be curious to dive deeper into what their day-to-day looks like. Can they sit still and pay attention? I mean, most of these kids don't have normal schooling lives, right? Normal learning patterns. There's a reason they became gymnasts in the first place.
Yes. I'm laughing because my 10-year-old will get up from dinner and do cartwheels.
Right.
And we're all like, she's a gymnast. She does gymnastics. And she just can't get through dinner without a cartwheel or two.
And it's a beautiful thing when you allow the kid to do what they need to do, as long as it's not impacting their day-to-day. And so a lot of families figure out how to use that to their advantage. Some get to the Olympics. Eventually, though, some integration needs to happen so that these kids can then move on to the next thing, whatever that may be. You know, if they want to go to college and do XYZ, which requires them to sit for long periods of time and read and pay attention and absorb more abstract kind of information, those reflexes need to become integrated in order for the eyeballs to work properly as they're tracking from left to right.
Okay, so what is like a healthy integration process look like, where we're not like going off in an extreme in any way, but we, you know, as babies did all the things they're supposed to do, and everything everything kind of ticked along the way it's designed to. Like, what does that look like?
So baby's born, ideally vaginally. A lot of integration or development of primitive reflexes, you know, emergence of primitive reflexes happens when the baby's going through the birth canal. Baby can breastfeed and latch on properly and is a thriving baby and is a healthy baby. Baby can progress through all the normal milestones that we're all comfortable with and grow and went through our early motherhood with, right? Do tummy time. Is the baby okay? Can they move their limbs? Can they flip back and forth? Baby gets up on all fours at a reasonable amount of time post-birth, you know, however many months that is. Baby can sit and hold his or her head up without issue at the proper time. So putting a 3-month-old in a bumbo chair, in a bumbo seat, I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah, I do.
I did that. Not ideal, not healthy. You know, you have to honor where the kid is. Baby can then crawl, can eventually get on 2 feet, stand up. That's not going to happen until a specific degree of development has happened for instance, the Babinski reflex, which is a foot reflex, which allows those toes to do whatever they need to do for balance. Then the baby's going to walk, the cross crawl, right, left alternation. That's the lifelong reflex that comes in once specific foot reflexes have done what they need to do, and then they integrate. Then toddler is going to do what toddler does. There's a whole lot of brain growth that is happening and sprouting and pruning of neuronal connections. And so the terrible 2s and the terrible 3s and whatnot, they don't have to be terrible. I've come to the conclusion that they're only terrible because we're putting our kids in situations that are not developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
And perhaps a primitive reflex or 10 are still active when they shouldn't be.
Okay, so I'm not totally understanding when you say like a primitive reflex is active when it shouldn't be. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Perfect. So let's take Babinski, for example. When the Babinski reflex, which is a foot reflex, is active, you know that it's active because the arch of the foot in an adult, for instance, is really high. Okay. And when you stimulate the plantar surface of the foot on the pinky side, on the little toe side, all the toes fan up.
Okay.
This is what I used to see all the time in spinal cord injury cases, especially anything interrupting descending control of the feet from the cortex. So spinal cord injury would do that, removes the inhibitory effect that the basal ganglia is having on those primitive reflexes. And so now the toes fan out. It's very hard to walk when your toes are fanned out.
Okay.
For instance, it serves a safety, developmental, survival purpose at the time. But in order for the kid to walk, those foot reflexes need to start quieting down. So they're active until they don't have to be active. They quiet down or they integrate is what we say.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Another example, TMJ. TMJ extra activity or disease. I hate to use the word disease, but that's what people are comfortable with these days. What's causing that? Or teeth grinding at night.
Okay. And
right?
TMJ, that's when your jaw is kind of locked up.
Well, the temporomandibular joint, that's what TMJ stands for. There's issues with the jaw working properly, and people overuse it, or again, the teeth grinding and TMJ health or lack thereof are two things that go hand in hand. Those two presentations can be traced back to an active mouth reflex, primitive reflex, sucking reflex, rooting reflex, Babkin. Okay. That reflex develops when the baby nurses. So the mouth is moving.
Okay.
You see somebody writing and they're moving their mouth while they write.
Yes.
Those are hand and mouth reflexes that remained active, primitive reflexes that are not completely integrated. The time for that integration to happen is when the baby's nursing. In fact, I call this the trifecta, or the hat trick primitive reflex integration. Mouth, hand, and foot reflexes develop together and integrate together while the baby nurses.
Oh, is that like why their little hands are kind of pushing on the breast, and their little feet are doing
opening
their
and closing?
Opening and closing.
Yeah.
Oh.
So a lot of exercises that we do, movements that we do for integrating these reflexes involve bending the toes to different degrees, or a lot of other modalities also approach this, whether they know that they're addressing an active primitive reflex or not, I don't know. But in therapy, I see a lot of individuals who are having issues with balance doing one of the exercises, which is picking up cotton balls from the floor with their toes and putting them in tins, for example. That requires a beautiful degree of control that relies on an integrated primitive reflex.
Wow. Okay. So when these integrations get skipped or interrupted for whatever reason, we can see the effects of that when the child is older and into adulthood.
Yes.
And so what I love, because I always want the good news, I always want the solution, is that what you're saying is that it's not too late if we engage with these exercises intentionally and find the ones that we each need. We can integrate those reflexes.
Yes.
Even if we're 18 or 50 or 70
or 80. Yep. It's really,
That's
really cool.
amazing.
That's how amazing our bodies are.
They really are.
I'm in awe every day, day in and day out. And I know I'm working on my Babinski every time I go out and ground barefoot in the grass, for instance.
Right. And just quickly on the Babinski. So for people who have completely flat feet, or one flat foot and one arched foot, what is typically the origin of that?
Again, so a flat foot is an undeveloped Babinski. Okay. And so in the courses that we do to teach healthcare providers how to integrate primitive reflex integration to their practice with the BRMT method, sometimes people end up developing an arch over the course of a weekend just by doing the rhythmic movements. Some of us are taking a little bit longer, depending on the size of your file, right, that you come with. Right. Baggage, decades of stuff.
Yeah.
But what got me started on seeing this work, not just good for ADHD or autism, which is what Dr. Blomberg started out with, is my personal experience using these rhythmic movements was in the context of chronic pain and how the pain was resolved. And it wasn't just this being the magic pill. This was the door through which I was able to access the vast beauty that true healing is. Some other people, somebody else might use a different door. It could be the circadian biology door, or the herbs or naturopathics or whatever, right? Everybody has different ways of looking at oneself. But for me, my experience was, threw my back out, was walking crooked, feeding the chickens, right? So it's one of those dumb moves that really tells you deep down that it wasn't that move that did it. I was already cooking.
Yeah.
And that was the last straw. Why? What else is going on? And so this work took me down that path of why is it working on the pain level? My pain perception changed tremendously within a week or two of doing these movements. I wasn't afraid of the pain. And eventually, as I started not being afraid, the pain started subsiding. And of course, there's a lot of physiological stuff that's going on too. But that just confirms to me that our bodies are simply an expression of our true selves. Right? The true Meredith, the true Amanda is the soul and the spirit. Right? This body is a mere reflection that is manifesting what's going on deeper. And I don't have the wherewithal or the training to explain this properly. I just know in my gut, and this is where I end up going with everybody. They end up being, the box of Kleenex is there. There's tears. There's release, especially with adult people. Kids, not so much. Kids are pretty straightforward, pretty practical, pretty beautiful. A beautiful reminder that it can be this easy. But with adults, we come with so much baggage, and our tissue holds on to that. And that's where the fourth phase water piece comes in, which, you and I've talked about in the past. And so when I first started diving down this work, and I asked my mentor, my instructor, well, how is it working? She said, well, we are bioelectric beings above all else. It's working at that energetic level, but nobody has been able to say much more about that. And now that we're beginning to uncover the quantum side of things, I truly believe that Dr. Blomberg was beginning to see that that's where we're headed with this work. And so this work can really have.
Yeah. And I mean, you say you're not an expert in this, but in how it works on a spiritual soul level, but you do have some very compelling hypotheses in terms of quantum coherence. So tell us a little bit about what your thinking is on that. We're not going to hold you to it. We know that it's a working.
It's my opinion.
It's a theoretical. It's a theory in progress. But as somebody who has trained in this primitive reflex and in the work of Dr. Blomberg, and somebody who has studied quantum biology, I don't know. You're probably the only person who's done both of those things. These are both fairly niche. So we're like deeply interested in your thoughts.
Well, so from what we know about quantum biology and the importance of structured water in the process of information transmission and also in the process of information storage, right? I see our body water as a memory bank, and I see our body water as this amazing quantum information superhighway, to quote Carrie Bennett and to quote Jim Oshman. So how exactly is that working? Well, the one podcast episode that really, really revolutionized my whole thinking on this was the one you did with Joanne Addison, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Her yoga, fascia, anatomy. I mean, she's my kindred spirit. And she's all
out of May Wenho. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I want to meet her someday in person because I'm like, okay, because that's my background, right? I'm an anatomist and a neuroanatomist by training. I've seen the human body in the cadaver lab. I know what it looks like. And that fascia that we cut through and move out of the way in order to get to the important stuff is dehydrated and dry like paper. And yet it's there. What does it look like when the person is not dead? What does it look like right now in you and in me? And we are beginning to understand, and this was something that became really apparent to me as I went through the quantum biology course. This fascia and the molecules and the proteins that make it up are surrounded by water. And we're now beginning to understand again, because of May Wenho's work and so on and so forth, Jim Oshman and his theories and his ideas, that this water is in fourth phase, negatively charged. And when you start diving deep into how collagen is arranged. And collagen is the most abundant protein in our body and is the most abundant protein in our fascial network. Fascia isn't just the pillowcases that cover our muscles deep below the skin, right? Fascia is this from macro to micro to nano to subatomic particle connection that is probably the only organ that touches every single cell in our body. Because the intracellular molecules that are connected to the extracellular matrix, which is fascia, are also fascia, that cytoskeleton. And then when you go inside the nucleus, the water inside the nucleus and the proteins inside the nucleus, they're also fascia. Everything is connected to everything, courtesy of fascia. And so then you dive deep into the work of Robert O. Becker, which incidentally worked right across the street of where I worked and where I got my training. My mentor in grad school, my advisor knew him.
Oh, wow.
And it was it's weird how this works, you know? And so I'm thinking, okay, there are no coincidences in this universe. And so Dr. Becker did amazing work in the field of piezoelectricity, understanding this idea that movement can generate electricity and it can happen at this nano level, at this micro level. Bone is nothing but mineralized fascia. Okay. The CSF inside our brain is a type of fourth phase water that is surrounding the meninges, which are specialized fascia, pia, arachnoid, and dura mater. The pericardium surrounding the heart, the pleural sacs that contain the lungs, the peritoneal sac that contains our internal abdominal organs. I mean, all of it is some version of fascia. Why? Why were we designed like that? And why are all those fascial molecules, proteins, like collagen, surrounded by that hydration shell? And so Carrie Bennett does a spectacular job of explaining and showing how the collagen triple helix is not only surrounded in its own hydration shell, but by virtue of that arrangement, there is this little tunnel inside, a nano-sized water tunnel, if you will, that enables electrons to flow at the speed of light, if not faster. So when I learned that and I read about that from Jim Oshman's body of work, and I'm listening to Carrie Bennett, I'm a neuroscientist, right? I know the nervous system, the brain, the action potentials, the electrical conduction in neurons and axons. I'm like, wait a minute. The nervous system doesn't convey information that fast from an electrical standpoint, from an action potential standpoint. You're telling me that water in our bodies, specifically water in our fascia, can move information faster than our nervous system? She's like, yeah. And so then the wheels kept turning and I started connecting the dots and I started, again, piezoelectricity. It doesn't have to happen in a big, lifting weights to do the muscle. That can generate electricity too. That's why working out is so important. But the gentle movements that we do in rhythmic movement training, what are those doing? Could it be that those gentle movements are also generating electrons and charging our fourth phase water by virtue of piezoelectric effect? But even more than that, because those are movements that we developed doing when we were feeling safe inside our mother's womb, could the water associated with that hold safety signals and safety information that got cut off because life happens? Trauma, abuse, a surgery, a disease, bullying in school, a traumatic birth that ended up in a C-section, mom's trauma during pregnancy. I mean, all these things affect our water, right? Mm-hmm. And if our water is so integral to information transmission and to memory storage, could it be that something as gentle as rhythmic rocking that recapitulates the movement that we did, that we were designed to do in the context of safety, could it be that that is unsticking the water in us and allowing information to flow again? People cry when they do this. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You know, people feel safe. People start yawning. Kids yawn a lot.
Right.
And
This is so amazing. And you explain it so beautifully, Amanda. Thank you. And yes, because as we were discussing earlier, we're so trained to think we need a big solution, right? And we talk about this a lot with the circadian piece. It's like, what do you mean? Just like, don't look at my phone at night and go outside in the morning? Like, that's going to make a big difference? Yes. Right.
mm-hmm.
And for you with the movement, it's like, I'm going to have to go to physical therapy and do like 17 different exercises for the next 9 months. And these, or train really, really, really hard to have this effect on my body. But what you just described with the quantum understanding is that it's like a little whisper sometimes. And then that whisper is carried out throughout the body, making all of these huge changes, quantum leap changes that seem impossible from such a small, gentle movement.
Yeah. So I'll give you the most recent example, because this is also a reminder that we're all works in progress, right?
Yes.
So last week I traveled to join my brothers to help my mom move. She's downsizing. She's moving to the coolest place ever. And so I went out. The day before I got on a plane, I woke up and my back started hurting. The same exact feeling that I felt when I threw my back out a few years ago. And that got me started on this rhythmic movement training journey. I'm at a point now where I don't fear that. I know that it's my body talking to me. I'm so excited. I was like, okay, fine. I'm dehydrated. Let's go. I'm going to harness my inner electron gatherer and all that kind of stuff, right? The grounding, the water, the sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. I knew all the things, and I was doing all the things. Doing the rhythmic movements. I'm still in pain. I could barely get through the airport with my backpack. I was plowing through. I'm just going to do this. I'm breathing. It's okay. I see Mom. It's wonderful. It's a phenomenal week. Everything flows. We're packing stuff. She did most of the work. I have to kudos to her for all of it. But still, moving is a big deal. I'm outside in her back one morning doing my sunrise, my water, my grounding, all the stuff that we learn, right? And I'm asking my body, okay, what's going on here? Why? What can I do? What am I missing? And the thought came to me, that's the exact same place where I was 6 years ago when my dad died.
Oh.
And I thought I had already worked through that.
Yeah.
But our body thinks otherwise. Our body remembers. Our body water holds on to stuff. And in the moment when Dad was in the process of transitioning, shall we say, I was there with my kids who were tiny at the time, and all I wanted to do was protect them. Not because death is bad, but I didn't know, and I didn't have the wherewithal in me to have this conversation with them. How am I going to explain to them what's happening? This is a big deal. I have to keep it together for them.
Yeah.
Right? And so I did. I kept it together because that's how incredible our bodies are.
Yeah.
But in primitive reflex speak, that's my tendon guard reflex, completely cranked up, tensing everything up. And people respond and present in different ways, right? But this was how my body, for whatever reason, chose to put this through, to manifest it, if you will. And so I knew that that's what was happening, and I just knew to chill, to figure out how to get through the day, and I knew that it was going to pass, and it was fine, but it didn't pass immediately. I finally got home. So this is 5-6 days we're talking of just working through it, right?
Yeah.
But I learned two things. One, I learned how to find ease in the thick of a situation where I couldn't check out.
Yeah.
And when I got home, I did what I needed to do. I couldn't even get on the floor to rock at that point. So finally, when I got home, I was able to get on the floor and do some gentle movements. And then I went back, I continued with all the electron gathering things, including a spectacular Epsom salt bath.
Nice.
So you see how all these things come into play. It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
But what helped me, and it is helping a lot of other people, but maybe not everybody, by opening my mind to this possibility, I was able to really be open to what else might be going on. And I didn't go for the painkiller. I didn't go for the muscle relaxant. I didn't go for the anti-inflammatory. I didn't go for the x-ray because, oh my gosh, do I have a pinched nerve or a slipped disc or whatever? Mm-hmm. If I do, I know that my body's going to take care of it. I know that now beyond the shadow of a doubt, because our bodies are so amazing. But we have to give them the right inputs, right? Address your inputs and the outputs address themselves. That's my motto. But it's a day-to-day thing.
And you using this as an example, it's like, okay, you did all the sort of foundational things and the pain was still like, no, you have not cracked me. So it was that awareness of being in communication with your body, with your soul, with your memories, and a connection was made. And it's like, and it's not like, oh, I found the smoking gun, everything's fine now. Like, it's still a process. But that awareness that pain originated around the death of your father did help move you through the process where that pain came back when you were addressing like a life change moment with your mother.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that fascinating? And I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't dreading it. I was hunky-dory. I was excited. This is going to be awesome. Oh my gosh, right? But again, back to how this might be.
But your body had a different idea.
Exactly. No, the body knows. The body remembers. The body anticipates.
Right. And that's so funny, because how often are we like, I don't know why I feel sad. Everything's fine. Or I don't like, it's like, and there's, that disconnection. And it's like, okay, what is the body feeling about this? Because it might be something completely different than the thoughts that I am having about it.
And again, remember, the thoughts are at the conscious level.
Yeah.
With this work, we are helping to bring the person back to the nervous system below the nervous system, to the unconscious, automatic nervous system.
Right.
We need to get out of this frontal lobe situation that rationalizes and counts and measures and judges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we need to, and so there's somebody that I follow on Instagram. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but this person, Dr. Sharina, I think she's based down in Florida. She does spinal flow, something or other. I'm eager to check this technique out. Her text, her quotes that she shares are powerful. The one that is really cool, that really not summarizes this work in a nutshell, is the language of the nervous system isn't words, it's sensations. And another quote, another zinger: we only heal in slowness and surrender.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Right? Those two really, I hold on to those when I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I missing with some person that I may be working with, or what am I missing with myself? Slow down. It's the body. The body talks to us. The body has a language of its own, right? And as we go on this journey of true healing, a key part of that true healing is learning the language of the body, learning how to listen. And most of the time, the things that the body says in the form of symptoms, pains, so on and so forth, are the body's way of telling us to just slow down, chill out. I got what I need. Trust me. That's so hard.
It's so hard, especially, and your to-do list is a mile long, and it's like, no, to do all of this.
But, and I've been coming up against this message over and over and over every time I pick up a book or get on a coaching call or go anywhere. The feedback I'm getting from the world is like, your progress will come from stillness, right? Like whatever is going on when you're not actively doing something is just as important, if not probably much more important than the tasks that you accomplish in active mode.
Well, because we think we're not doing anything, but that is so not true.
Right. And that, yeah, when I think of your explanation of the fascia and the quantum coherence that's going on in our bodies, like when we're busy all the time, we're almost overriding that. And to give the stillness, it's like,
exactly,
we need to give it the space to do its magic.
Well, think about when you plant a seed and, you know, a tomato seed or a carrot seed or a lettuce seed. It takes a couple weeks, if not a little more, depending on environment, depending on how hot the days are, depending on how much water there is, so on and so forth. It takes a couple weeks for that seed to sprout and burst through the dirt. It doesn't mean that the seed is not doing anything in the darkness, in the stillness of the earth below the surface, right? So much that's happening.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah. And this is so true too, because it's like, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, well, you know, there's so much to do, but it's actually really my worry about all the things to do. That's probably right. Like when I actually sit down to take care of the things, it's like, oh, well, that took 5 minutes. Oh, well, okay. Well, this was actually took some time and focus, but it's not in the doing. It's in the, it's in the anticipation of the doing. And then, so we spend most of our time either in like, I got to get this done, or worrying about when I'm going to get things done, and opening it up for that stillness. So I'm curious now, I'm thinking you mentioned earlier about, so Dr. Blumberg came into this through autism and ADD. And like, as I'm talking, I'm kind of describing some cognitive processes that I think a lot of people go through, but especially people with ADD, where it's like you're kind of caught up in your mind a lot. So integrating our primitive reflexes is going to help to slow that down, would you say? Or how would you explain how it helps with ADD or mental busyness?
Yeah. So let me go back and put this image in our minds. So when we're born, our nervous system is all in place, right? We have a brainstem, we have the basal ganglia, which are deep, deep inside the brain, and they are in charge of movement, regulating the intensity of the movement. And then we have the limbic system, and then we have the cortex, the neocortex, which is the part of the nervous system that differentiates us from other mammals, the evolution of it, right? All those parts are in place, but they're not linked up to each other. As we go through development, in utero and then postnatal, movement and the sensations that movement elicits allow the different parts of the brain to link up to each other so that they're all talking and having a coherent conversation. And one of the biggest pieces here is the communication pathways between the brainstem and the next level up, which is the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia includes a number of different neuron groups. One of them is the substantia nigra, which is full of melanin, which Dr. Cruz talks a lot about. And that is the melanin that is absent in people with Parkinson's. So to give you an example of this, how this relates to speed and our ability to slow down or not. What happens, what do you see when you look at a person with Parkinson's disease? There's eventually in advanced situations or Parkinson's-like disease, there's a mask type expression. The muscles of the face are slow to convey whatever emotion the person is feeling. But another classic is that resting tremor.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in a kid with ADHD? They can't sit still. One of the beautiful things that Dr. Blomberg is suggesting is that this inability to sit still or to control the movement is our own body's way of generating movement to begin to generate the stimulus that eventually is going to cause the primitive reflex to do its thing and then disappear. So let me repeat.
Okay.
Remember I told you that cycle? Movement, stimulus, linkage. More movement, more stimulus, higher levels of linkage, and so on and so forth. When there's not enough movement in the system, for whatever reason, a baby constrained to a car seat, a mom who isn't active enough during pregnancy, drug-related lack of movement, toxicity, chemical toxicity, medications, a movement that causes a lack of movement because somebody is in freeze, a shock, a trauma, a loss. I'm going to protect, so I'm going to freeze. Okay, all the different variations of lack of movement. When there's a lack of movement, there's not enough stimulation to allow the linkage to happen. Because our bodies are so amazing, they devise ways to get that movement in if the person is not bringing it. Hence the hyperactivity, hence the resting tremor. You ask a kid with ADHD to walk, and they can't. They have to run.
Yes.
Right?
I've observed that.
They have to run because if they walk, the movement is going to be halty and interrupted. The primitive reflexes controlling the feet are active, so they can't go slow. And what controls the speed of movement is a healthy basal ganglia projecting down to the brainstem, saying to the primitive reflex circuits, okay, guys, you've done what you needed to do. Now you can be quiet. That's called an inhibitory action. Okay, the brain is all about excitatory and inhibitory actions. That's all it is. It's on, off, right?
Right, okay.
And the beautiful interplay between the two. Excitation of the nervous system is essential for establishing patterns and establishing linkage. And once those primitive reflexes here have done their job, the basal ganglia in the next level up comes in and says, okay, guys, quiet down now. You're good. And they exert that inhibitory action. And when that inhibitory action is in place and healthy, you have a kid who moves out of the ants in the pants stage and can now sit and pay attention.
Okay.
So I would argue it's okay to be ADHD until we're not. We shouldn't tamp it down ahead of time because we need that movement for a while, right?
Right. That's the body trying to catch up.
Generate enough stimulus so that the brain can link up.
And with the primitive movement technique, it's like actually instead of the body just constantly moving, trying to figure out a way to do it, we are focusing the body so that it can make that connection more effectively.
Exactly.
That's
more
so
quickly.
Cool. Right. And then does that then also slow down the thinking, like the cognitive piece of that, where you're just jumping around from topic to topic to topic?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's also part of the reflex being integrated has that effect cognitively as well.
Eventually, the executive portions of our brain, executive function portions of our brain also come into linkage. And it's easier for us to focus, to manage, to prioritize, to time manage. People who have issues with that, or anger management, or the list is endless of presentations that can be taken back to a root cause of active primitive reflexes.
Right.
Anxiety, depression.
So fascinating. I'd love to do a whole talk on ADD. I'll have to have you back because there's a lot I want to unpack with that, but we'll stay on focus for this one. And I'm going to bring up the case study that I mentioned to you before we started recording, because I just wanted to make sure that was a topic that you're like, yeah, that's worth going down that track. So the case study is a 17-year-old girl. It is my daughter. I do have her permission to share this. And when you, on our last podcast, when you explained how this all worked, and I've, of course, speak to many people here about many wonderful things, but I just had this deep intuitive hit, like my daughter needs this. So she has been working with you doing these gentle rhythmic movements. She loves it. And she loves her time with you, just FYI. And so I've kind of left her to it, and she's been doing that, and, you know, periodically, and it's a few months go by, and all of a sudden my husband and I start to notice, like, she, you know, she's more integrated. She's like less all over the place. And she's actually lost a lot of weight, which was not anyone's goal. We were not doing anything dietary or exercise related. She's always been someone who carried extra weight, and we couldn't really ever understand why, because it was not related. She would be doing water polo 4 times a week. It just wasn't related to food or exercise with her. And as she's moved away from puberty, it has started to go down, but there was a huge, like, quite a significant drop in her weight. And we're like, wow, I wonder. She's like, Mom, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, what have you been doing differently the last few months? And I thought, oh my gosh, she's been doing primitive reflex integration. And is it possible that her nervous system she didn't have that feeling of safety? And so for some reason, her body was holding that extra weight, and doing these little exercises, very simple, gentle things, like, changed her nervous system to a place of safety, and changed how her body functions. Like, is that possible?
That's my theory. That's my opinion, because I am seeing it too. I don't want to put words in Dr. Blomberg's mouth.
Okay.
But my understanding of it stems from a neuroanatomical platform. Think about location, real estate, location. Well, what's happening at a neuroanatomical level? The neuronal circuits for these primitive reflexes lives in the brainstem. What else lives in the brainstem? Our breathing centers, which are our most foundational function, our most foundational physiological. If we can't breathe, we don't live. What else lives in the brainstem? The vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the parasympathetic nervous system. And the brainstem is intermittently and intricately connected to the hypothalamus, right there, nearby, where our sympathetic outflow originates. And what else lives in the hypothalamus? Our satiety centers, our fat monitoring centers, think leptin, think ghrelin. So you have a suprachiasmatic nucleus receiving information about light. You have the paraventricular nucleus, which is where all these other cellular networks, if you will, reside, telling our body how much energy it has stored, how much energy it might need. You can let go. This goes back to Carrie Bennett and Sarah Kleiner's work on leptin. My theory, my opinion, is that as we bring safety inputs back into a system, that information gets to where it needs to go, which is our nervous system below the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. And those two can now begin to talk to each other the way they were intended to. And sympathetic doesn't feel the need to be the boss all the time. And parasympathetic can come in and do what it is created to do, think, rest, digest, reproduce. And so it makes sense to me that if we're coming in with safety signals, reminding an individual's brain of what is safe and telling them, okay, you can let go now. It's okay. You don't have to be on all the time. then the energetic distribution is going to settle down. The body's not going to feel the need to hoard fat, right? For a time of scarcity. Things kind of fall into place. I'm seeing it in middle-aged or perimenopausal women and briefly postmenopausal. And in myself too, I'm still working on losing excess weight, but my view of the whole thing of me has changed. And I have come to the conclusion that the weight is going to be just a beautiful, the weight coming off in us older women with all this hormone stuff going on. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be one of those happy, beautiful consequences of all these other things getting regulated first. And the regulation is happening at the level of the nervous system. And so chronic pain is being resolved. Women are getting over depression. Women are able to, little by little, wean off thyroid meds and or anxiety medication or SSRI inhibitors for depression and so on and so forth as they engage in this work. Again, plus the circadian stuff. Plus the hydration stuff. Okay, this is not in isolation. We have to remember that. We are quantum beings. Everything is happening all at once, right? So as women that I work with begin to implement all these different things, but the nervous system piece is key, things are resolving, and all of a sudden one of the last things to set in is that weight loss that pretty much everybody comes to see one of us for, right?
Right, yes. Yes, especially the perimenopausal weight gain, because it feels like it comes out of nowhere.
It comes out of nowhere, and you can go days fasting and it's still there. And so clearly that's not the right approach. So what else is going on? And everybody's going to be different. But what I'm finding is that all of us need the hug and need the understanding and need the silence and the compassion and the non-judgment. And I know we know this. It's almost cliche, but the community aspect that comes from, oh my gosh, you know what I need, or how about you lie down on your back and bend your knees? These are cues that I give them to get them into position and start rocking off of your feet and just notice. Let me know what you feel. How's your back? How does the scalp behind your head feel as you rock? Notice. Don't judge. And as I utter those words, it's almost like the floodgates open. We all are in a position, we've worked ourselves into this thing in this culture, this day and age, where we need permission to let go. And it's pretty sad, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll give you permission. Let's do this.
And isn't it amazing? Like, it's just, we just need that space held. And it's all right there. People are like, oh, I don't know. I'm not in touch with my body, or I'm not in touch with my feeling. And we all are. Mm-hmm. It's our environment, right? Like if we put ourselves in a situation where the space is held for stillness and connection, it's there.
Yeah. And then to help the paradigm shift really take place, which is, okay, no, you may feel really good really quickly, but you may not. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've been learning as I apprentice with my amazing mentor, Dave Boyland, is, when he's working with people and they come, after a few sessions, they're like, I'm feeling okay here, but now this hurts. He's like, that's great. Awesome. So now people that are working with me know that if they come and tell me that something else is hurting, I'm going to say that's awesome. To me, that means the body is communicating. That means that the body now feels safe to speak up.
Wow.
And so things are going to shift. Things are going to move, maybe from the shoulder to the lower abdomen, to the whatever, to the lower back, to the foot. Things are moving. They're processing, they're moving, and eventually they're going to leave. That's how I see Charlie horse cramps in the middle of the night now. Energy that was stuck now gets to leave.
Right.
Oh no, I'm low on magnesium. Whatever, maybe that's true. But let's go back to the energetic side of us, right? And so this work to me is just a gateway drug, if you will, to a whole new way of looking at our amazing body.
Yes.
And it's
looking
free.
at it and listening to.
Yeah, you can pay me so I can teach you these things, but then you take it into the rest of your life.
You have it for the rest of your life.
You're done.
Yeah. And it's easy. I now have, Millie now teaches the movements to me.
Good.
And yeah, it's delightful. It feels so nice. Amanda, thank you. This has, been a really, really powerful discussion. And Amanda will be teaching an upcoming workshop on this topic. And I think maybe we should do like a group session or something where you can get a bunch of us together and we can sign up to work with you as a group. I think that'd be fun. If you're up for it.
Cool.
Yeah. So to work with Amanda, which I really do recommend, it's Horeos Wellness. Horeos. We will put the link in the show notes. It's HORAI. OS. Thank you.
Sorry.
Spaced.
People told me you should pick an easier to pronounce name, and I couldn't. It's a Greek word that means the perfect time or the beautiful time. And it's been with me since my teens, since my whole journey started. And I was like, no, you know what? People are going to just figure out that they can roll their R's and it's okay.
Absolutely. And it's, once you see that word, it stays with you. I think it's beautiful. So Oreos.
It's coming, Meredith.
We'll have to do some pronunciation workshops too. Anyway, the link is also in the show notes. You can find Amanda. You can also just Google her, Amanda Stencken, Steencken. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me back. This is really beautiful.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
Woohoo! You made it to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploratory adventure into new realms. Your energy and support are building a different world, and I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. Take care, and thanks.